Ladies and gentlemen, I have so much to talk to you about today, and I must be honest, it's very rarely that I actually start to record a video, do my research, I just get really annoyed with the subject content. But today is an exception. So, let's actually get onto it. What exactly has annoyed me? Well, actually, it's Cyril Ramaphosa's speech at Davos. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cyril's at Davos for their usual WEF meeting. And before I actually get on to what Cyril said, I actually want to get on and talk about what the old mutual boss said, because his exact speech was actually more relevant to the modern world. What he actually said is in relation to Donald Trump. He said South Africa must avoid poking the bear obviously being Donald Trump. Now, one of the things that he did actually say is that South Africa is currently on a path of reform. What we need to do is keep on that path of reform, stay out of Donald Trump's way, and you know what? We may see capital inflows into the country in a year or so. He did say that there is this global rise of nationalism, which means that countries like ours, open economies that aren't, highly nationalistic, do actually have some risks in the modern world. Now, what he actually meant by risks, so that the strong countries are going to have their own agenda, they're going to do what they want, and the weak economies, like ours, are just going to have to do what we can and navigate through the storms. Effectively, he said, it's every country for himself. Which, if you think about it, is fair, because that's actually what countries should be pursuing, their own interests. He further said that South Africa itself shouldn't expect any favors, and that the idea of multilateral organizations like the WHO and the WTO are currently struggling to remain relevant, and shouldn't really expect any relevance going forward because of the rise of nationalism. Now, for those of you who didn't know, yesterday Donald Trump withdrew from the WHO. Good on you, lad. So let's have a look what claptrap Cyril Ramaphosa had to say. Well, Cyril Ramaphosa, being a globalist stooge, basically said that he wants to see reform to the global multilateral financial institutions. He talked about the great big achievements in South Africa being the GNU and the end of load shedding. He also talked about how he was going to lead the G20 this year. And then we all know exactly what's going to happen after that. He's going to resign because he's going to have all the big things that he thinks he's achieved in hand, and he's going to bugger off. Now, he then went on to say that the global organizations need to be more representative and more responsive to the needs of citizens. And what we actually need is we need collective efforts by all countries, and we need to strengthen the global elite so that we can have no person and no country left behind. He says that inequality stops growth and development. And that what we all need to be doing is pursuing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that by doing that, we'll reduce inequality. Now, you see, I find stories like this to be highly insulting, because what that effectively means is South Africa isn't able to play against the larger players, and it's not. It's a small market. It's a small emerging market. And so what South Africa wants to do, under the guise of Cyril Ramaphosa, is use communist terminology. No country left behind. Yes, but you see, that isn't what happens. We don't drag up other countries. We drag other countries down. It's like what we see in South Africa. Let's all adopt communist thinking. That doesn't mean that we drag everybody else up to a higher standard. It means that those in a higher standard get dragged down. So what? We must have better representation so that a country like Zimbabwe can throw its weight around and tell countries like the US what its priorities should be. Because that's why these globalist organizations don't work in the first place. Because the larger countries think that half the items put on the agenda by these smaller countries are just pointless and pathetic and stupid. They're all talking about how to get to the moon and to Mars, and we're all talking about how to have power and a railway station. Things that their ancestors sorted out in 1760. Now, Cyril then went on to basically talk about how debt sustainability in the lower income countries was just a big issue, and it's because they have to pay back their debt that is causing rampant inequality. Yes, mate, but what you also failing to understand is that, like every country, your country can also raise taxes, and those taxes are used to fund government infrastructure and spending programs. The only difference is you generally tend to steal all the cash, not have any infrastructure build, and then you go on and give all of your little buddies that vote for you in the government sectors above inflation pay rises, despite being told year upon year upon year by the IMF not to do so. But you see, you know better, because these people vote for you, right? Except in the last elections they didn't, so you still lost. But you see, no one's actually told the ANC that they've lost, because the ANC still thinks it's in power. And you know what? The DA lets it continue to think it's still in power, and the DA allows it to run roughshod all over it. And I must say, I found the entire speech by Cyril to be yet again more commie rubbish. And if you were ever in doubt of Cyril's globalist socialist credentials, go listen to the speech. It's complete garbage. And the problem is, as the big boss of Old Mutual said, there is a rise of nationalism globally. This is not feeding into that. You are not trumping the best interests of your country because you're incapable of it. You constantly have to have a handout. It's unsavory. On the world stage, give us a handout. Yeah, we want to be like everybody else. Just make it so. We're not going to do the hard work and we're going to continue to thieve, but you know, just give us some money. It's unnecessary and it's distasteful. And you know, it reminds me of another story that's distasteful. And before I go on to it, if you haven't already, remember, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Anyway, the story that I'm referring to is actually around PetroSA. Now, for those of you who haven't been following it, and I'm actually going to link this story in the description box below, you've got to read the full story. Like, I'm going to talk about it, but even when I talk about it, it's not doing it justice. Now, PetroSA is actually a liquid petroleum plant in Mossel Bay. And the actual liquid petroleum plant is, well, currently not operational because it doesn't meet environmental standards. It needs a lot of money in order to actually get it up to standard and get it back operational. And over the preceding years, PetroSA has been attempting to gain finance to do said renovations and get it back online. Well, a couple of years ago, a deal was done with Gazprom Bank by, you know, the ANC. Now, the deal itself was really weird because you see, 20 companies put bids in, and of those 20 companies, 19 were rejected, only one magically qualified, and that was Gazprom Bank, the Russian bank. Now, you see, the Russian bank, interestingly enough, actually submitted their bid even before the actual tender specs were even signed off. So that led many individuals to say, yeah, this wasn't legit. This was just some kind of kickback and some prearranged agreement. But you've got to read the actual story, right? So apparently that the bank said that there should be a $3 to $5 million investment report that needed to occur, that they were going to pay some local BE tender guy. Yep, an unnamed BE tender guy. Who knew? And this feasibility study, which this BE tender guy would be, as I said, in the value of like $5 to $10 million US. That's a lot of money. Apparently, the actual report, though, wouldn't actually get underway until that chosen BE guy also got a government grant for an infrastructure feasibility study from an SEO, which is actually under the control of the president. The study itself may or may not have happened. I mean, some funds clearly got exchanged. Usual PNZ kickback. You can see it. You got to read the report. It is just so obvious that it's just a kickback and a bribe. In any case, what ended up then happening is the bank kind of went silent. Maybe they were going to fund it. Maybe they weren't going to fund it. Then they said, well, we actually can't come over and check the feasibility ourselves because we couldn't get a visa. When they checked if they had applied for a visa, the answer was no. Then after a lot of pressure, even some media pressure, the bank said, oh, we will fund it. Then they said they won't. And a lot of people argued, even at the time, there were massive problems with this entire deal. The first was that clearly, and the Russians highlighted this themselves, so it was even in their own report, the due diligence was just substandard, which meant that actually from a legal perspective, that the actual funding arrangement would clearly be available for challenge. And that challenge would just get the whole tender put aside. Outside of that, they also noticed that, you know, they're sanctioned, so the money was never actually going to make its way through to the country because they're sanctioned. Now, after they're saying they will fund it, they won't fund it, they will fund it, then they did say they would fund it. And then when they asked them for the money, they basically said, we can't send it to you because we're sanctioned. And then they just went silent. So they're not funding the program because they've not followed their obligations. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is ANC all over. I mean, the ANC wants to go out there, shut its mouth off at parties like Donald Trump. And would you know, they're going to go, oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to side with people like Russia. And then Russia stabs them in the back. Love to see it. But the level, ladies and gentlemen, the level of blatant bribery and corruption in this, you just got to read the article. I've got no words. Read the freaking article. It is just so obvious. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is all in the same time when Cyril's sitting there asking for a handout at WEF. These people have no shame. No shame whatsoever. Anyway, that's just my views. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll catch you tomorrow. Bye.